In the vast expanse of the Andromedus galaxy, where 1,000 species bow before the Zephyrian Empire, legends speak of warriors whose mere presence can shift the balance of power between worlds. But what happens when an empire built on absolute dominance discovers that their greatest threat doesn't come from advanced technology or superior numbers, but from something far more dangerous, the unpredictable spirit of a species that refuses to kneel? When Princess Kalra of the Zephyrian royal house questions her mother's iron grip on the galaxy, she never expected the answer to come in the form of a single human prisoner. And, when Queen Vixara gestures toward the scarred figure in chains and declares that is my warrior, she sets in motion events that will either forge the greatest alliance the galaxy has ever seen, or unleash a force that could tear apart an empire that has stood for millennia. Some battles are fought with plasma cannons and quantum shields. Others are fought with something far more powerful, the indomitable will of those who have nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The crystalline spires of Zephyrs Prime pierced the purple sky like frozen lightning, their surfaces reflecting the twin suns that had witnessed the rise and expansion of an empire spanning 14 solar systems. Within the highest tower, the throne chamber of eternal dominion hummed with the energy of 1,000 conquered worlds, its walls embedded with fragments of defeated civilizations as trophies of Zephyrian supremacy. Queen Vixara sat upon her obsidian throne, her forearms draped elegantly over its armrests, each finger ending in claws that could slice through quantum steel. Her skin, a deep shade of violet that shifted like liquid mercury in the chamber's light, or the ritual scars of every victory her empire had claimed. 2 rows of luminescent gills along her neck pulsed with each breath, and her 6 eyes, arranged in pairs across her elongated skull, fixed upon her daughter with the intensity of a predator studying prey. Princess Kalra stood before the throne, her posture rigid with barely contained defiance. Unlike her mother, whose presence commanded fear through raw power, Kalra possessed a different kind of authority. Her movements were fluid, calculated, like a blade dancing through air. The ceremonial armor she wore bore no battle scars, a fact that had become a source of growing tension between mother and daughter. You question my methods again, daughter, Queen Vixara's voice resonated through the chamber, each word carrying the weight of absolute authority. The translation matrix embedded in the walls converted her native Zephyrian into the common galactic tongue, though it could never fully capture the subtle threats woven into her inflection. I question the wisdom of ruling through fear alone, mother, Kalra replied, her own voice steady despite the dangerous ground she walked. Our empire grows larger, yes, but our subjects grow more restless with each passing cycle. Resistance movements spring up faster than we can crush them. The queen's middle pair of eyes narrowed, a gesture that had preceded the execution of countless advisors who had dared offer similar counsel. Resistance is like a virus, child. It spreads when the host believes itself strong enough to challenge the cure. The solution is not gentleness, it is a more potent medicine. Around the chamber, the queen's personal guard stood motionless, their environmental suits humming softly as they maintained their vigil. These were not Zephyrians, but members of a dozen different species who had proven their loyalty through blood and service. Each bore cybernetic modifications that enhanced their natural abilities, making them perfect instruments of the Queen's will. Perhaps, Kalra said, taking a step closer to the throne, but even the strongest medicine can poison the patient if applied without wisdom. The Terran system, for instance, yes. Queen Vixara's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. The humans. Your latest fascination. She gestured with her upper right arm toward a section of the chamber where several large viewing screens descended from the ceiling. You study them as if they were some great mystery rather than simply another species to be absorbed into our empire. The screens flickered to life, displaying images from the recent conquest of Earth's solar system. Cities in flames, human military units making desperate final stands, and long lines of prisoners being processed for transportation to various Zephyrian worlds. The footage was clinical, efficient, showing the systematic dismantling of human resistance. They fought for 18 months against our advance forces, Kalra said, her voice thoughtful as she watched the images. Longer than any other species has managed in the past decade. Even when we demonstrated our technological superiority, even when we offered them the standard terms of surrender, they continued to resist. Stupidity is not admirable, daughter. It is simply stupidity. Is it? Kalra turned back to face her mother. Or is it something else? Something we've forgotten in our centuries of conquest? The queen's lower arms drummed against the armrests of her throne, a rhythm that the more perceptive members of her court had learned to recognize as a warning. Enlighten me, child. What profound wisdom do you believe these primitives possess? Before Kalra could respond, the chamber's main doors opened with a deep, resonant chime. Commander Thexvel, the Queen's primary military advisor, strode into the room. His species, the Karathi, were natural warriors, tall, heavily muscled, with thick carapaces that could deflect small arms fire. The numerous battle scars across his body spoke to his experience in the field. Majesty, he said, offering the ritual bow required in the Queen's presence. The prisoner's selection is complete. As requested, we have chosen one from each of the major human military branches. They await your pleasure in the preparation chambers. Queen Vixara's attention shifted to her commander, but Kalra could sense the undercurrent of anticipation in her mother's posture. Excellent, Thexvel. Have them brought to Arena 7. Today, my daughter shall have her lesson in human nature. Mother, what are you planning? Kalra's voice carried a note of concern. An education, child. You seem to believe these humans possess some quality worthy of respect. I intend to show you otherwise. The Queen rose from her throne, her full height of nearly 3 meters casting a shadow over her daughter. You will observe what happens when human courage meets Zephyrian reality. The royal procession made its way through the palace's gleaming corridors, past galleries filled with artifacts from conquered worlds and memorial chambers dedicated to Zephyrian victories. Servants and minor officials pressed themselves against the walls as the Queen passed, their various species united in their shared fear of her displeasure. Arena 7 was one of the smaller combat chambers within the palace complex, designed for intimate demonstrations rather than grand spectacles. Its circular floor was composed of adaptive matter that could be configured for any type of combat scenario, while the surrounding viewing galleries provided perfect sightlines for observers. As they entered the royal viewing box, Kalra noticed that several other members of the court had been summoned to witness whatever demonstration her mother had planned. Lord Zaksoth, the Minister of Planetary Affairs, stood beside General Katara, the head of the Imperial Guard. Their presence suggested this was more than a simple lesson, it was a statement. Bring them in, Queen Vixara commanded. The arena floor reconfigured itself into a simple circular platform surrounded by a shallow pit filled with electromagnetic barriers. A moment later, 6 humans were escorted onto the platform by a squad of Zephyrian guards. Even from her position in the viewing gallery, Kalra could see the defiance in their posture. The humans were clearly military personnel, though their uniforms were torn and stained from their recent captivity. They ranged in age from what appeared to be barely adult to grizzled veterans, their various service branches represented by different insignia and equipment configurations. What struck Kalra most was not their physical appearance. Humans were remarkably similar to Zephyrians in basic body structure, but their behavior. Most conquered species, when brought before Zephyrian royalty, displayed either cowering fear or resigned acceptance. These humans stood straight, their eyes scanning their environment with tactical awareness rather than terror. One of them, a female with graying hair and numerous scars, even had the audacity to meet Queen Vixara's gaze directly when she looked up at the viewing gallery. Interesting, Kalra murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. Observe, daughter, the Queen said, activating the arena's communication system. Her voice echoed from speakers positioned around the combat floor. Humans of Earth, you stand before Queen Vixara of the Zephyrian Empire. Your world has fallen, your military has been defeated, and your people now serve the will of our civilization. The humans exchanged glances, but none spoke. Their silence seemed to amuse several members of the court. You have been brought here to provide a demonstration, the Queen continued. Your species' reputation for stubbornness has reached even these halls. We wish to see if this reputation is deserved, or merely the product of ignorant pride. She gestured, and the arena floor began to reconfigure itself once more. Weapons racks rose from the surface, displaying an array of both primitive and advanced armaments. You will fight. The last one standing will be granted the honor of single combat against one of our champions. Should you somehow achieve victory in that encounter, you will be granted a quick death rather than processing for labor assignments. One of the humans, a younger male with lieutenant's insignia, finally spoke. His voice carried clearly through the arena's acoustics.
And if we refuse to fight each other? Queen Vixara's mandibles clicked in genuine amusement.
Then, you will all be processed for the gladiator pits of Korath Prime, where you will fight alien predators for the entertainment of our citizens until you die.
The choice is yours. The humans huddled together for a brief conference.
Kalra found herself leaning forward, curious about what decision they would reach. Every previous species faced with this choice had eventually turned on each other, their survival instincts overcoming any sense of unity.
After several moments, the graying female stepped forward.
"We won't fight each other," she said simply.
"If you want to see us die, you'll have to do it yourself."
A murmur ran through the viewing gallery.
This was unexpected. Queen Vixara's 6 eyes focused intently on the woman. "You would choose certain death over the possibility of survival?"
"We choose to die as humans rather than live as entertainment for your empire," the woman replied. "Our war may be over, but we don't surrender our dignity." The silence that followed was deafening.
Kalra could feel the tension radiating from the other court members. This was not how these demonstrations typically proceeded.
"Fascinating," Queen Vixara said finally.
"Remove the weapons." The arena floor shifted again, the weapon racks sinking back into the surface. "Guards, select one of them." "Any one."
The Zephyrian guards moved quickly, grabbing the youngest of the humans, barely more than a boy, really, and dragging him to one side of the arena. The other 5 humans immediately surged forward, only to be driven back by energy weapons. "Now," the queen said, "we shall see how long your unity lasts when the cost becomes personal." She activated another control, and a section of the arena floor opened to reveal a holding pen. From within emerged one of the Empire's standard interrogation tools, a Vorthak, a creature resembling a massive centipede with crystalline mandibles that could inject a paralyzing venom. The creature immediately oriented on the isolated human youth, its numerous legs carrying it forward with disturbing speed. The boy, to his credit, did not break. He stood his ground, his hands clenched into fists despite their obvious futility against such a creature.
That was when something unexpected happened.
The graying woman looked directly up at Queen Vixara and spoke in a voice that carried across the arena despite its conversational tone.
"Your Majesty, I have a question."
The queen, intrigued despite herself, signaled for the Vorthak to pause.
"Speak."
"You rule an empire of 1,000 worlds, command fleets that can sterilize planets, and your technology is centuries beyond ours.
Why do you need to prove anything to a handful of defeated soldiers?"
The question hung in the air like a challenge.
Kalra felt her breath catch.
Few beings in the galaxy had ever dared speak to the queen in such a manner. "Elaborate," Queen Vixara said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You're trying to teach your daughter a lesson about human nature," the woman continued, somehow having intuited the purpose of this demonstration.
"But what lesson are you really teaching? That power means never having to understand those you rule? That strength comes from inspiring fear rather than respect?"
"Enough," General Katara interjected from her position beside the queen.
"You will not lecture Her Majesty."
But Queen Vixara raised a hand for silence, her attention fully focused on the human below.
"Continue."
"Your empire is vast, but it's built on a foundation of conquered subjects who serve out of fear rather than loyalty.
How long can such a structure last? How many resources do you spend maintaining control that could be better used for growth and exploration?"
You speak of humans as stubborn, but perhaps what you see as stubbornness is actually something your empire has forgotten, the willingness to fight for principles rather than just survival.
Kalra found herself nodding almost unconsciously.
The human was articulating thoughts she had struggled to express for years.
"You suggest," Queen Vixara said slowly, "that there is value in resistance? In defiance of lawful authority?"
"I suggest that there's value in understanding why people resist," the woman replied. "And in considering whether the thing they're resisting is worth preserving." The queen was silent for a long moment, her multiple eyes fixed on the human with an intensity that made several court members shift nervously.
Finally, she spoke. "Return the young one to his companions. Remove the Vorthak."
She paused, then added, "Bring me their files."
"All of them."
"I wish to know more about these prisoners who would lecture a queen about the nature of power." As the guards complied with her orders, Queen Vixara turned to her daughter.
It seems, child, that your humans have provided us with a more complex demonstration than I had anticipated. Kalra met her mother's gaze. They have indeed, mother.
The queen's mandibles clicked once more, but this time the sound carried a note of consideration rather than amusement.
We shall continue this lesson tomorrow. But, tonight, I have much to contemplate.
As the royal party departed the arena, leaving the 6 humans under heavy guard, Kalra couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had just shifted in the palace of the Zephyrian Empire. The human woman had not merely spoken words of defiance, she had asked questions that went to the very heart of how the empire operated. And, for the first time in her long reign, Queen Vixara seemed genuinely interested in finding the answers. The royal quarters of Queen Vixara occupied the entire uppermost level of the palace, a sprawling complex of chambers that served as both private residence and command center for the Zephyrian Empire. In her personal study, surrounded by holographic displays showing real-time data from across 14 solar systems, the Queen reviewed the files of the 6 human prisoners with an intensity she rarely devoted to individual subjects. The woman who had challenged her was Colonel Sarah Chen, formerly of the United Earth Defense Force. Age 53, veteran of 12 major conflicts, decorated for valor under fire on 17 separate occasions. Her psychological profile, compiled by Zephyrian Intelligence during the conquest, painted a picture of someone driven by an unwavering moral code rather than personal ambition.
What made Chen particularly intriguing was her background.
Born on one of Earth's colony worlds, she had witnessed the destruction of her home planet by an alien invasion force, not Zephyrian, but a species that the Empire had later absorbed through conquest. Rather than becoming bitter or seeking revenge, she had dedicated her life to protecting others from experiencing similar losses. Fascinating, Queen Vixara murmured, her upper arms manipulating the holographic controls while her lower hands drummed thoughtfully against her desk. The other 5 humans showed similar patterns, individuals who had consistently chosen duty and principle over self-preservation throughout their careers. A soft chime indicated that someone had requested entry to her chambers. Enter, she commanded without looking up from the files.
Princess Kalra stepped into the study, her expression thoughtful.
Unlike the formal armor she wore for court functions, she now dressed in the simple flowing robes preferred for private family meetings. The change made her appear younger, more like the idealistic daughter who had once asked endless questions about the nature of leadership and power. Mother, I wanted to discuss what happened in the arena today. Queen Vixara gestured for her daughter to take a seat in one of the chairs positioned before her desk.
I assumed you would. Your thoughts? Colonel Chen wasn't simply being defiant, Kalra said, settling into the offered chair. She was probing.
Testing to see how we would respond to intellectual challenge rather than physical resistance.
Indeed. And, what did her probing reveal? Kalra hesitated, knowing that her answer could lead to dangerous territory.
That perhaps we become so accustomed to ruling through fear that we've forgotten how to rule through understanding.
Queen Vixara's 6 eyes focused on her daughter with laser intensity.
Understanding is a luxury afforded to those who are secure in their power. We rule an empire built from the conquest of species who would gladly see us destroyed if given the opportunity. Fear ensures survival. But, does it ensure loyalty? Or does it simply guarantee that our subjects will rebel the moment they perceive weakness? The Queen was quiet for several moments, her attention apparently returning to the human files. When she spoke again, her voice carried a note of something that might have been uncertainty. Tell me, daughter, if you were in my position, how would you handle the human situation? It was a question that Kalra had never expected to hear from her mother. Queen Vixara had built her reign on the principle that she was always correct, always superior, always in complete control. To ask for input suggested a level of doubt that seemed fundamentally at odds with everything the Queen represented.
I would talk to them, Kalra said simply.
Not interrogate, not threaten, talk. Find out what drives them, what they value, what they hope to achieve even in defeat. And, you believe this would yield useful intelligence? I believe it would yield something more valuable than intelligence, insight. We know how to defeat human technology and tactics. We learned that during the conquest. But, we don't understand what makes them willing to die rather than compromise their principles. That kind of knowledge could be the difference between ruling humans and ruling with humans.
Queen Vixara's mandibles clicked softly. An interesting distinction. Elaborate.
Every species we've conquered becomes a resource to be managed rather than a people to be integrated. We extract their labor, their knowledge, their compliance, but we never gain their genuine cooperation. The result is an empire that constantly expends energy on suppression rather than growth. You speak as if integration is possible with a species that has shown nothing but hostility toward our rule.
Kalra leaned forward in her chair. Mother, what if their hostility isn't toward our rule, but toward the methods we use to establish it? What if the problem isn't that humans are inherently rebellious, but that we've never offered them a reason to see our empire as anything other than an occupying force?
The queen studied her daughter's face for a long moment.
You propose an experiment. I propose a conversation.
Allow me to speak with Colonel Chan and her companions. Not as interrogator to prisoner, but as one leader to another. Let me discover whether there's a foundation for something other than subjugation. Queen Vixara rose from her chair and moved to the large viewing window that dominated one wall of her study. Beyond the crystalline spires of the palace, the capital city of Zephys Prime sprawled in all directions, a testament to the power and reach of the empire she had built. Countless alien species worked and lived within those structures, all serving the greater glory of Zephyrian civilization.
Very well, she said finally. You will have your conversation.
But it will take place under controlled conditions, and with full monitoring. If your theory proves incorrect, if they attempt to use this opportunity to gather intelligence or plan some form of resistance, the consequences will be severe.
I understand, Mother. Do you?
The queen turned back to face her daughter. Because I suspect that what you truly hope to prove is not the value of human cooperation, but the possibility that our empire itself could benefit from fundamental change. That is a much more dangerous proposition.
Kalra met her mother's gaze steadily. Perhaps the most dangerous proposition is the idea that we can continue ruling through fear indefinitely.
The galaxy is vast, Mother, and we are not the only power seeking to expand. Sooner or later, we may face a threat that cannot be defeated through superior technology alone.
And you believe humans could be the key to preparing for such a threat?
I believe that understanding how to inspire genuine loyalty rather than fearful compliance could be the key.
If humans can demonstrate that possibility, then we need to learn from them.
If they can't, then we've lost nothing more than a few hours of conversation. Queen Vixara returned to her desk and activated the communication system.
Commander Thexval, report to my study immediately. She then turned back to Kalra. You will have your conversation tomorrow. But you will not have it alone.
Within minutes, the massive form of Commander Thexbel filled the doorway to the Queen's study. His scarred carapace gleamed under the chamber's lighting, and his compound eyes immediately fixed on the Queen with military precision.
Majesty. Commander, Princess Kalra will be conducting an interview with the human prisoners tomorrow. You will provide security and observe. I want a full tactical assessment of anything they reveal, intentionally or otherwise. Understood, Majesty. Shall I prepare standard interrogation protocols?
No, Queen Vixara said.
This will be conducted as the princess sees fit. Your role is to observe and protect, not to direct.
If Thexval found this unusual, his disciplined demeanor gave no indication.
As you command, Majesty.
After the commander departed, Queen Vixara spent several more hours reviewing not just the human files, but intelligence reports from across the empire. What she found was a pattern that her daughter's words had brought into sharp focus.
Resistance movements, resource allocation problems, the constant need to maintain large occupation forces on recently conquered worlds, all symptoms of what Kalra had identified as the fundamental weakness of fear-based rule.
The next morning dawned clear and bright over Zephys Prime, the twin suns painting the crystal spires in shades of gold and violet. In the palace's secure conference chambers, Princess Kalra made final preparations for her unprecedented meeting with the human prisoners. The chamber she had chosen was deliberately non-threatening, a circular room with comfortable seating and large windows that provided a view of the palace gardens. Rather than the sterile environment of an interrogation facility,
it felt more like a diplomatic meeting space. When the 6 humans were escorted into the chamber, Kalra could see them taking in every detail with professional interest. Colonel Chan's eyes lingered on the windows, calculating distances and angles with the automatic assessment of a trained soldier. The others spread out naturally, maintaining clear sightlines to all exits while appearing to simply choose comfortable seats. Commander Thexval positioned himself near the main entrance, his massive frame a silent reminder of the power that backed this conversation. 2 additional guards flanked the secondary exits, though they maintained a respectful distance. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Kalra began, settling into her own chair. "I know the circumstances are not ideal." Colonel Chen studied the princess with sharp eyes. "Your Highness, with respect, we weren't under the impression that we had a choice in the matter." "You don't," Kalra admitted. "But I wanted to begin with honesty rather than pretense. My mother believes that your species represents nothing more than a resource to be managed. I'm hoping to discover whether she's correct." One of the other prisoners, a middle-aged man with engineer's insignia, spoke up. "And what do you believe we represent, Your Highness?" "I believe you represent something our empire has never encountered before, a species willing to accept defeat rather than abandon their principles. That suggests either admirable strength of character or dangerous fanaticism. I'm hoping you can help me understand which it is." Colonel Chan leaned forward slightly. "Princess, may I ask you a question?" "Of course. Why does it matter?" "Your empire has conquered our worlds, captured our people, and demonstrated overwhelming technological superiority. From a strategic standpoint, our principles are irrelevant. So why does our behavior in your arena yesterday warrant this conversation?" It was exactly the kind of direct challenge that would have resulted in immediate punishment in any normal interrogation. Instead, Kalra found herself appreciating the colonel's willingness to get straight to the heart of the matter. "Because," she said, "I've spent my entire life watching our empire grow larger and stronger, but never more stable. We rule through fear, and fear requires constant reinforcement. Every world we conquer becomes another world we must patrol. Every species we subjugate becomes another potential rebellion we must prevent. The energy we spend on control is energy we can't spend on exploration, on innovation, on becoming something greater than we are." The youngest of the prisoners, the boy who had faced the Vorthak without breaking, spoke for the first time. "You're asking whether there's a better way." "I'm asking whether your species can teach us a better way," Kalra corrected. "Yesterday, you faced death rather than compromise your unity. That's not normal behavior for conquered peoples. Most species, when faced with impossible odds, either surrender completely or fragment into competing factions that try to curry favor with their conquerors. Most species," Colonel Chen said quietly, "haven't spent their entire evolutionary history fighting for survival on a world that seemed determined to kill them at every opportunity." This caught Kalra's attention. "Explain." "Humans evolved on a planet with more environmental dangers than most species encounter in their entire spacefaring careers. Ice ages, volcanic winters, plague outbreaks, predators that made our ancestors into prey. We survived by cooperation, by understanding that individual survival meant nothing if the group didn't make it." Another prisoner, a woman with the insignia of a ship's captain, added, "That's why we didn't fight each other in your arena. It wasn't noble defiance, it was practicality. Humans who turn on each other in crisis don't survive long enough to pass on their genes." "Interesting," Commander Thexval rumbled from his position near the entrance. "You speak of cooperation, yet your species has a documented history of constant warfare among your own kind." Colonel Chen nodded. "True. But, notice the pattern, we fight fiercely against external threats and, among ourselves, but we rarely fight to extinction. Even our most bitter enemies usually find ways to coexist once the immediate crisis passes. We're aggressive, but we're also pragmatic." "And how does this translate to your current situation?" Kalra asked. "It means we understand that resistance and cooperation aren't mutually exclusive," the engineer said. "We can fight your occupation while still recognizing that you're not inherently evil. Your empire represents a threat to our autonomy, but that doesn't make you monsters." Kalra felt something shift in her understanding. You're saying that humans could work with the Empire if the terms of that cooperation were different?
We're saying that humans work best when we're partners rather than subjects, Colonel Chen replied. Give us a stake in the outcome, treat us as valuable contributors rather than conquered resources, and you might be surprised by what we can accomplish together.
And if the Empire continues to treat humans as it has?
The Colonel's expression hardened. Then, you'll find out why it took 18 months to fully conquer our system, and why resistance movements keep appearing despite your overwhelming military superiority. Fear works for compliance, Your Highness, but it doesn't work for loyalty. And, in the long run, an empire built on compliance alone will always be vulnerable to something it can't simply overpower. The conversation continued for several more hours, ranging across topics from human history to Zephyrian imperial policy. What emerged was a picture of a species that had learned to balance competition with cooperation, individual achievement with collective survival.
More importantly, Kalra began to see how those traits could be assets to the Empire rather than threats.
When the session finally concluded, Commander Thexval escorted the prisoners back to their quarters while Kalra remained in the conference chamber, reviewing what she had learned. The humans had provided no actionable intelligence about resistance movements or military capabilities. Instead, they had offered something potentially more valuable: a blueprint for transformation. As she made her way back to the royal quarters to report to her mother, Kalra realized that the conversation had changed her as much as it might change imperial policy. For the first time, she could envision an empire built on strength that didn't require the constant application of force. Whether Queen Vixara would share that vision remained to be seen. The Palace of Eternal Dominion trembled. Not from any external attack, but from the deep, resonant alarm that echoed through its crystal corridors, a sound that had not been heard in over 2 decades. In her private study, Queen Vixara's multiple hands moved across holographic control surfaces with practiced efficiency as streams of data flowed across the displays surrounding her. Report, she commanded as Commander Thexbel burst into the chamber, his usually composed demeanor showing cracks of genuine concern. The Karlax Confederation has moved into the Outer Rim, he said, his voice tight with urgency.
3 full battle fleets, including their new dreadnoughts. They've taken the Meridian system and are advancing on Kelter Prime. Queen Vixara's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of intense calculation. The Karlax were an ancient enemy, a species that had matched Zephyrian expansion for centuries before retreating to distant reaches of the galaxy. Their sudden return represented a threat that couldn't be dismissed through overwhelming force alone. Casualties? The Meridian garrison was completely destroyed. No survivors. Intelligence suggests they're using some form of new weapon technology. Our shields had no effect.
Princess Kalra entered the study without waiting for permission, having heard the alarms throughout the palace.
Mother, what's happening?
War, daughter.
The kind we haven't faced since the early expansion days.
The Queen's 6 eyes remained fixed on the tactical displays. The Karlax have returned, and they appear to have developed something that neutralizes our technological advantages.
Defensive options?
Kalra asked, moving to stand beside her mother's chair.
Limited, Thexval admitted.
Our standard fleet formations are designed for conquest operations against inferior forces.
The Karlax always matched us in conventional warfare. If they now possess superior weapons technology. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the room understood the implications.
Queen Vixara was silent for several moments, her mind's processing strategic calculations at a rate that few beings could match. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a note that Kalra had never heard before: uncertainty.
How long before they reach the core systems? At their current rate of advance, 6 weeks. Perhaps 7 if we can delay them at the fortress worlds.
Not enough time to develop countermeasures to their new weapons, the Queen mused.
Not enough time to recall our occupation fleets without leaving conquered worlds vulnerable to rebellion. Kalra watched her mother grapple with a strategic situation that had no clear solution through conventional military thinking.
It was a moment she had never expected to witness: Queen Vixara facing a problem that couldn't be solved through superior force. Mother, she said quietly, perhaps this is the time to consider unconventional approaches.
Elaborate. The humans.
Colonel Chen spoke yesterday about cooperation versus compliance.
What if we offered genuine partnership to our subject species? Full integration into the Imperial military rather than service as auxiliaries? Commander Thexval's compound eyes swiveled toward the princess.
Your Highness, with respect, subject species cannot be trusted with full military authority. The risk of rebellion is less than the risk of total conquest by the Karlax, Kalra interrupted.
Our current military doctrine is built on the assumption that we always face inferior opponents. That assumption is no longer valid. Queen Vixara's attention shifted between the tactical displays and her daughter's earnest face. You propose to arm and empower the very species we've spent decades conquering. I propose to transform subjects into citizens. To give them a stake in the Empire's survival rather than just its dominance. Kalra paused, then added, starting with the humans. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft hum of the holographic displays. Finally, Queen Vixara spoke. Bring me Colonel Chen.
20 minutes later, Colonel Chen stood in the Queen's study, flanked by 2 guards but no longer shackled. Her bearing remained military despite her prisoner status, and her eyes took in the tactical displays with professional interest. Colonel, Queen Vixara began without preamble, you are a student of military history.
What do you know of the Karlax Confederation?
Chen's eyebrows rose slightly at the unexpected question.
Ancient enemy of your empire, your majesty.
Fought you to a standstill in the Outer Rim Wars before withdrawing to deep space. Technologically sophisticated, tactically flexible, and historically resistant to conventional conquest strategies.
Indeed. They have returned, and they appear to possess weapon systems superior to our current defensive capabilities.
The Queen gestured toward the tactical displays.
In your assessment, what would you require to mount an effective defense against such a force?
The directness of the question clearly surprised Chen, but she answered without hesitation.
Everything, your majesty.
Every ship, every soldier, every tactical advantage you can muster. Fighting an equal or superior opponent requires total commitment of resources.
And what of our subject populations? In your human military doctrine, how would you utilize recently conquered peoples in such a crisis?
Chen was quiet for a moment, clearly understanding that her answer carried implications far beyond military theory.
Your Majesty, conquered peoples fight differently depending on what they're fighting for. If they're fighting for their conquerors, they fight reluctantly and break easily.
If they're fighting for their homes, for their own survival and the survival of something they value, they fight with everything they have.
You suggest that fear is not sufficient motivation for total war.
I suggest that desperation makes poor soldiers, but determination makes excellent ones. Queen Vixara rose from her chair and moved to the window overlooking the capital. Below, millions of beings from dozens of species went about their daily lives, unaware that their entire civilization might be about to face extinction. Princess Kalra believes that your species could serve as a model for transforming our subject populations into willing partners. She believes that cooperation rather than compliance could provide the Empire with resources we have never fully utilized.
The Queen turned back to face Chen.
I am skeptical of this assessment, but current circumstances may require me to test it.
What are you proposing, Your Majesty? A demonstration.
You and your companions will be granted provisional military commissions in the Imperial fleet. You will be given access to our tactical databases, our technology, our intelligence on Karlax capabilities. In return, you will provide your honest assessment of our defensive options and your recommendations for how human military doctrine might be adapted to our current situation. Chen's expression remained carefully neutral, but Kalra could see the spark of professional interest in her eyes.
And if our assessment is that the Empire cannot win using current strategies?
Then, you will help us develop new ones.
Queen Vixara's mandibles clicked once.
But, understand, Colonel, this is not a humanitarian gesture.
This is a calculated risk based on immediate necessity.
If you or your companions attempt to use this opportunity to gather intelligence for future resistance operations, the consequences will be final.
I understand, Your Majesty. But, I have a condition.
The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees.
Speaking of conditions to Queen Vixara was tantamount to signing one's own death warrant.
Continue, the Queen said, her voice deadly quiet. If you're asking us to help defend the Empire, then you need to give us something to defend. Not just fear of what happens if we lose, but genuine investment in what happens if we win. My people need to know that victory means a different future, not just a return to subjugation under a different enemy. You dare to negotiate with me? I dare to point out that motivated allies are more useful than reluctant tools, Chen replied steadily. Your Majesty, you're asking humans to potentially die for an empire that has shown us nothing but conquest and control. That's a hard sell under the best circumstances. But, if you're asking us to help build something better, something worth preserving. She let the sentence hang unfinished, but her meaning was clear. Queen Vixara studied the human for a long moment. What, specifically, do you require? A guarantee that human worlds will be granted autonomous status within the Empire after the crisis. Self-governance under imperial oversight, not direct administration. The right to maintain our own military units. And representation in whatever governmental structure oversees imperial policy. Impossible, Commander Thexval interjected. No subject species has ever been granted such autonomy. Then, perhaps, Chen said mildly, that's why you've never had truly loyal allies. Queen Vixara raised a hand for silence. You ask for fundamental changes to the structure of our empire. I ask for a reason to make those changes worthwhile, Chen corrected. Your Majesty, you can conscript human bodies, but you can't conscript human ingenuity. Our greatest strength has always been our ability to find new solutions to impossible problems. But that requires freedom to think, to experiment, to fail and try again. That can't happen under strict imperial control. The Queen returned to her chair, her multiple hands drumming against the armrests in complex rhythms. Around the room, the tactical displays continued their steady stream of updates from the advancing Karlax forces. Very well, she said finally. You will have your provisional guarantees. But they will be contingent on performance. Prove that human cooperation can provide military advantages that human compliance cannot, and we will discuss permanent arrangements. Chen nodded. Understood, Your Majesty. Commander Thexval will provide you with access to the tactical databases and arrange for your companions to be briefed on current fleet dispositions. You will report directly to Princess Kalra, who will coordinate your efforts with our existing command structure. As Chen was escorted from the study, Queen Vixara turned to her daughter. You have what you wanted, child. Now prove that it was worth the risk. Over the following days, the palace transformed into a war room as human insights began flowing into imperial planning sessions. Colonel Chen and her companions brought perspectives that had never been considered in Zephyrian strategic thinking, tactics based on adaptive thinking rather than overwhelming force, logistics systems designed for flexibility rather than efficiency, and, most importantly, command structures that encouraged initiative at every level. The most significant breakthrough came from the youngest human, the lieutenant who had faced the Vorthack without breaking. His specialty was electronic warfare, and his analysis of Karlax weapon signatures revealed something that Zephyrian scientists had missed. The new weapons were effective against static defenses, but vulnerable to adaptive countermeasures. They're assuming you'll fight the same way you always have, he explained during a briefing attended by the entire Imperial command staff. Massive formations, fixed defensive positions, overwhelming firepower. Their weapons are specifically designed to counter those tactics. And you propose? General Katara asked. We propose fighting like humans, Colonel Chen interjected. Small unit tactics, adaptive formations, asymmetric warfare. Force them to fight a kind of battle they haven't prepared for. It was a radical departure from centuries of Zephyrian military doctrine, but, as reports continued to arrive from the frontier, it became clear that conventional approaches were failing catastrophically. 3 weeks after the first alarms, Queen Vixara stood once again before the main tactical display in her study. But, this time, the indicators showed something different. Imperial forces using human-inspired tactics were beginning to slow the Karlax advance. Status report, she commanded as Princess Kalra and Colonel Chen entered the chamber. The modified formations are working, Kalra reported. Casualties are down 60%, and we've actually managed to retake 2 of the frontier systems. The Karlax are adapting, Chen added. But they're adapting to counter tactics they expect from conquered peoples rather than integrated allies.
It's giving us an edge they can't quite understand. Queen Vixara nodded slowly. And morale among the integrated units? Higher than anything we've seen from subject populations, Kalra admitted.
When people fight for something they've helped build rather than something they're forced to serve, the difference is remarkable. The Queen was silent for several moments, watching the tactical displays update with increasingly positive reports from the battlefront.
Finally, she spoke. Colonel Chen. Your Majesty? Your people have proven their point. Human cooperation has provided advantages that human compliance never could.
She paused, then added, the question now becomes whether those advantages are worth the risks of permanent integration.
Chen met the Queen's gaze steadily.
Your Majesty, the bigger question might be whether the Empire can afford not to change. The galaxy is vast, and the Karlax won't be the last threat you face.
Building an empire that people want to defend might be the only way to ensure it survives.
As alarms began sounding once again throughout the palace, this time indicating not invasion but a major breakthrough in the outer system defenses, Queen Vixara found herself facing a decision that would reshape not just the war, but the very nature of the empire she had built. The Imperial Throne Chamber had been transformed into something unprecedented in Zephyrian history, a war council that included not just high-ranking military officers and noble advisors, but representatives from every major species within the empire. The ornate ceremonial furniture had been replaced with functional tactical displays and communication arrays, while beings who had never before set foot in the palace's most sacred space now stood as equals among the empire's leadership. Queen Vixara surveyed the assembled crowd from her obsidian throne, her six eyes taking in details that would have been unimaginable just weeks earlier. A Karathi general stood beside a human colonel, their different physiologies requiring no translation as they shared tactical data through universal military gestures. A delegation of crystalline beings from the Nexus worlds huddled around holographic projections with Zephyrian engineers, their combined expertise producing innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. Status report, the Queen commanded, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's enhanced acoustics.
Princess Kalra stepped forward, flanked by Colonel Chen and Commander Thexvel. The Karlax advance has been halted at the terminus line.
Combined fleet operations have successfully pushed them back from 5 contested systems, and our intelligence networks report significant confusion within their command structure.
They're fighting an enemy they don't understand, Chen added.
Traditional Zephyrian tactics they could counter, but integrated operations using doctrines from multiple species have created scenarios their strategists never prepared for. A new voice joined the conversation, Admiral Kekstar of the Voidstalkers, a species of energy beings whose incorporeal nature had made them nearly impossible to integrate into conventional military structures. The quantum disruption techniques provided by my people, combined with human electronic warfare capabilities and Zephyrian firepower, have proven devastatingly effective against Karlax shielding systems. Queen Vixara nodded approvingly, but her expression remained thoughtful.
And what of the political situation? How are the newly integrated populations responding to their expanded roles?
This question carried weight that extended far beyond military considerations. The transformation of subject peoples into genuine partners had required fundamental changes to imperial law, government structure, and social hierarchy. The speed of those changes had created friction within traditional power structures. Lord Zaxoth, the Minister of Planetary Affairs, cleared his throat nervously before responding.
Your Majesty, there have been adjustments required.
Several of the older noble houses have expressed concerns about the precedent being set. They worry that granting autonomy to human worlds could inspire similar demands from other recently conquered species.
And how have you addressed these concerns? The Queen asked.
By pointing out that extinction makes all political concerns irrelevant, Princess Kalra interjected before Zaxoth could respond. The noble houses can retain their traditional privileges or they can retain their heads, but not both if we lose this war. The bluntness of this statement sent a ripple of tension through the assembled crowd. Few beings in the Empire had ever heard royalty speak so dismissively of the established order.
Queen Vixara's mandibles clicked once, a sound that could indicate either amusement or annoyance. Continue, daughter.
Mother, the integration program has revealed something significant about the nature of our empire.
The species we've conquered aren't inherently inferior, they're simply unmotivated. When given genuine stakes in the outcome, when treated as partners rather than resources, their capabilities increase exponentially. She gestured toward one of the tactical displays showing the current battlefield disposition. Human ingenuity, Karathi battlefield tactics, Nexus technological synthesis, Void Stalker energy manipulation. Individually, these are useful tools. Combined through genuine cooperation, they become force multipliers that exceed anything we achieved through traditional command structures.
Colonel Chen stepped forward, her bearing respectful but confident.
Your Majesty, if I may add a perspective from the human integration experience, what we're witnessing isn't just military effectiveness. It's the emergence of something genuinely new. Not just a Zephyrian empire with better weapons, but a true galactic civilization.
Elaborate, the Queen commanded. The Karlaks represent old thinking, conquest through superior technology, victory through overwhelming force. They're fighting us the way they've always fought you, and losing because we're not responding as a traditional empire.
We're responding as something they've never encountered before.
A commotion near one of the communication stations interrupted the discussion.
A Zephyrian technician was receiving urgent transmissions from the frontier, his expression growing increasingly concerned as he processed the incoming data. Report, Commander Thexval ordered. Commander, we're receiving surrender overtures from the Karlaks fleet commanders.
Not just tactical withdrawals, formal requests for armistice negotiations. The silence that followed was profound. In over 3 centuries of expansion warfare, the Zephyrian Empire had never received a surrender offer from an equal opponent. They had either achieved total victory or faced total defeat, with no middle ground. Queen Vixara rose from her throne, her full height casting shadows across the assembled crowd.
Terms? Unknown, Your Majesty. They're requesting direct negotiations with Imperial leadership.
They specifically mention wanting to understand the nature of the new galactic power they've encountered.
They don't know what to make of us, Chen said quietly.
An empire that fights like 20 different species simultaneously, using tactics that complement rather than dominate each other.
From their perspective, it probably looks like magic.
Princess Kalra turned to her mother.
This is the moment, isn't it?
Not just the end of this war, but the beginning of something completely different. Queen Vixara was quiet for several moments, her multiple eyes fixed on the tactical displays that showed the positions of fleets representing not just Zephyrian military might, but the combined strength of dozens of species working toward common purpose. Summon the full council, she said finally. Not just military leadership, but civilian representatives from every integrated world. If we're going to negotiate as a new kind of galactic power, then we should do so with the full voice of that power. Over the next several hours, the throne chamber filled with beings who had never before been invited to participate in imperial decision-making. Humans sat beside ancient Zephyrian nobles, their different perspectives on governance and warfare blending into something unprecedented.
The Karlaks delegation arrived under heavy escort, their insectoid forms encased in environmental suits that allowed them to survive in the palace atmosphere.
Their leader, a being whose titles translated roughly to prime strategist, carried himself with the rigid bearing of a military professional facing an uncertain future. I am Zektal, commander of the Confederation's expeditionary forces, he announced through his suit's translation system. I come seeking understanding of the power that has emerged in the galactic core. Queen Vixara, flanked by her daughter and Colonel Chen, studied the alien commander with interest.
You seek understanding of defeat, Zektal?
I seek understanding of transformation, the Karlaks replied. Our intelligence indicated we would face the Zephyrian Empire, a traditional conquest civilization with predictable military doctrine and hierarchical command structures. Instead, we encountered something that fights with the tactical flexibility of 20 different species while maintaining the strategic coherence of a single command.
And what conclusions has this led you to draw? Zektal's compound eyes shifted to take in the diverse assembly surrounding the throne.
That the old models of galactic power are obsolete. Neither the Confederation's technology-based supremacy nor the Empire's force-based dominance represents the future of interstellar civilization.
Colonel Chan leaned forward slightly. Commander, what do you believe does represent that future?
What you have created here, Zektal replied immediately. A structure that harnesses diversity rather than suppressing it, that treats different species as complementary rather than competitive. Our strategists have never encountered anything like it. Princess Kalra exchanged a meaningful glance with her mother before speaking.
Commander Zektel, the structure you're describing didn't exist 3 months ago. It emerged from necessity, the necessity of survival against your advance. Which makes it even more remarkable, the Karlak's commander said. You transformed an empire in the space of weeks. That suggests either exceptional leadership or exceptional fundamental principles.
Both, Queen Vixara said simply.
But, more importantly, it suggests that the choice between conquest and cooperation is a false one.
True strength comes from the ability to inspire others to join you in building something greater than any single civilization could achieve alone. The negotiations that followed established not just an armistice, but the framework for something entirely new, but galactic confederation based on voluntary association rather than forcible conquest. The Karlaks, despite their initial hostility, proved interested in the integration model that had transformed the Zephyrian Empire. But, as the formal ceremonies concluded and the various delegations began departing for their home worlds, Queen Vixara remained in the throne chamber with her daughter and Colonel Chen.
The easy part is over, she said quietly. Your Majesty? Chen asked. Winning a war, even transforming an empire, these are simple compared to what comes next.
Now we must prove that what we've built can survive success.
The Queen moved to the great window overlooking the capital.
Every species that joins us will bring its own perspectives, its own conflicts, its own ambitions.
Managing diversity is far more complex than suppressing it. But, also more rewarding, Princess Kalra observed.
Mother, look what we accomplished in just a few weeks when we stopped trying to control everything and started trying to coordinate everything.
Indeed. But, coordination requires trust, and trust requires vulnerability. We've opened ourselves to possibilities we've never faced before.
Queen Vixara turned back to face her daughter and the human colonel.
The question becomes whether we're prepared for the responsibilities that come with genuine leadership rather than simple dominance.
Colonel Chen smiled slightly. Your Majesty, speaking from human experience, I can tell you that the responsibilities never get easier. But, the rewards, the sense of building something that's truly greater than the sum of its parts, make those responsibilities worthwhile. As the twin suns set over Zephy's prime, painting the crystal spires in shades of gold and violet, Queen Vixara contemplated the magnitude of the transformation her empire had undergone. What had begun as a simple lesson about human nature had become a fundamental reimagining of what galactic civilization could become. The challenge now would be proving that this new vision could endure not just the test of war, but the more complex test of peace. 6 months had passed since the end of the Karlaks War, and the Palace of Eternal Dominion bore little resemblance to the fortress of conquest it had once been. The crystal corridors that had once echoed only with the footsteps of Zephyrian nobility now accommodated beings from across the galaxy, their diverse physiologies requiring adaptive architecture and universal translation systems throughout the complex. In what had once been the throne chamber of Eternal Dominion, now known simply as the Council Chamber, Queen Vixara presided over the weekly assembly of the Galactic Confederation. The obsidian throne remained, but it was now surrounded by seating arrangements that accommodated everything from the crystal and lattice structures preferred by Nexus beings to the energy containment fields required for Void Stalker representatives. The Outer Rim integration proceeds ahead of schedule, reported Administrator Vexlon, a former Zephyrian military commander who had adapted remarkably well to civilian governance. 17 new systems have requested Confederation status in the past month alone. Queen Vixara nodded approvingly, but her attention was primarily focused on a more complex issue represented by the holographic displays surrounding the chamber. The success of the Confederation had created unexpected challenges. Species that had once been enemies of the Empire were now seeking membership, refugees from failed civilizations required resettlement, and the rapid expansion was straining the new governmental structures. What of the Terran integration? She asked. Colonel Chen, now bearing the rank of Admiral in the Confederation fleet, stepped forward. Your Majesty, the autonomy accords are working better than anyone anticipated. Human worlds are contributing beyond their quotas for both military service and technological development. More importantly, other newly integrated species are adopting similar governance models. And the resistance movements? Largely dissolved, Princess Kalra reported from her position as Director of Integration Services. It's difficult to maintain a rebellion against a government that grants most of your demands before you ask for them. This drew what might have been chuckles from several of the assembled beings, though the sounds varied dramatically across species.
Queen Vixara's mandibles clicked thoughtfully.
The old empire was built on the principle that different meant inferior. The Confederation operates on the principle that different means valuable. The transition has been surprisingly smooth, but I suspect we haven't faced our greatest challenges yet. As if summoned by her words, the chamber's primary communication array activated with the distinctive harmonic pattern that indicated an urgent message from deep space. The holographic displays shifted to show an incoming transmission from the edge of known space, where Confederation scout fleets maintain watch for threats from beyond the galaxy. The image that materialized showed Captain Torres, a human officer commanding one of the mixed-species exploration vessels that had become the Confederation's primary tool for peaceful contact with new civilizations. "Your Majesty," Torres said, her voice tight with urgency, "we've encountered something unprecedented in the void beyond. A refugee fleet, thousands of ships containing survivors from what they claim is a dying galaxy." The silence in the chamber was profound. Contact with extragalactic civilizations was theoretical at best, and refugee fleets of such magnitude suggested catastrophes beyond normal comprehension.
"Details, Captain," Queen Vixara commanded.
The lead ship identifies itself as carrying the survivors of something they call the Devourer Wars, a conflict against entities that apparently consume entire star systems for energy. Their technology is advanced, possibly beyond our current capabilities, but their condition suggests they've been fleeing for decades.
Admiral Chen moved closer to the communication array. "Captain, what are their intentions? Are they seeking temporary refuge or permanent settlement?" "Unknown, Admiral.
They're requesting immediate audience with Confederation leadership, and they specifically asked about the empire that became something greater.
Apparently our transformation has become known in other galaxies."
Queen Vixara exchanged glances with her daughter and the senior staff. Captain Torres, maintain safe distance but extend formal diplomatic courtesies. We'll dispatch a full contact team within 6 hours. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber buzzing with conversation in a dozen different languages as species representatives discussed the implications of extragalactic contact. "Mother," Princess Kalra said quietly, "this could be the ultimate test of everything we've built."
"How so?"
"If we can successfully integrate refugees from a completely different galaxy, beings with no previous exposure to our civilization, then we'll have proven that the Confederation model works on a truly universal scale."
Admiral Chen approached the throne, her expression thoughtful. "Your Majesty, there's another consideration. If these beings possess advanced technology and they're fleeing something powerful enough to destroy entire galaxies, then we may need their cooperation as much as they need our assistance."
Queen Vixara rose from her throne, her full height lending gravity to her words.
"Summon the full diplomatic corps.
Everything we've learned about integration, about cooperation versus conquest, about building trust with former enemies, all of it will be tested in the coming days." The next 24 hours transformed the palace into a hub of frantic activity as the Confederation's most experienced diplomats, military officers, and civilian administrators prepared for first contact with an extragalactic civilization. Human expertise in adaptive thinking combined with Zephyrian logistical capabilities and the analytical skills of the Nexus beings to create preparation protocols that could accommodate virtually any possible scenario. When the refugee fleet finally entered the system under heavy escort, the sight was unlike anything in recorded history. The ships were massive, each one easily the size of a Zephyrian dreadnought, but their design suggested engineering principles that operated on fundamentally different assumptions about space, time, and energy. The diplomatic meeting took place aboard the Confederation flagship Unity of Purpose, a vessel that had been specifically designed to accommodate multiple species simultaneously. The main conference chamber featured adaptive environmental systems, universal translation matrices, and holographic displays capable of representing information in formats accessible to any known form of consciousness. Queen Vixara led the Confederation delegation personally, flanked by Princess Kalra, Admiral Chen, and representatives from each of the major species within the alliance. Their preparation had emphasized flexibility and openness, principles that had served them well in transforming enemies into allies.
The extragalactic delegation was led by a being that defied easy categorization.
Humanoid in basic structure but composed of what appeared to be living crystal matrices, the entity introduced itself through harmonic resonances that the translation systems rendered as harmony of distant stars. "We greet the Confederation of the Inner Galaxy," Harmony said, its voice carrying overtones that suggested multiple consciousness streams operating in parallel. "We come seeking not conquest, not dominance, but partnership and survival." "You are welcome here," Queen Vixara replied formally. "Tell us of your situation, and how we might assist." "Our galaxy faces extinction," Harmony explained, and the holographic displays around the chamber filled with images of stellar devastation beyond imagination. "Entities we call the Devourers consume stellar energy directly, leaving dead systems in their wake. We are the last survivors of a civilization that once spanned millions of worlds." Admiral Chan leaned forward. "These Devourers, are they following you?" "Unknown. They consume systematically rather than pursuing specific targets. But our projections suggest they will reach this galaxy within several thousand of your years." The time frame was vast by individual standards, but represented the mere blink of an eye in galactic terms. Princess Kalra spoke into the stunned silence. "Harmony of distant stars, what you're describing isn't just a refugee crisis, it's a threat to all galactic civilization." "Indeed. Which is why we seek alliance rather than merely sanctuary. Our technology, combined with your apparent mastery of interspecies cooperation, might provide the foundation for resistance strategies that neither of our civilizations could develop alone." Queen Vixara studied the crystalline being with her 6 eyes, each pair processing different aspects of the situation. "You speak of our mastery of cooperation. How do you know of our transformation?" "The resonance patterns of genuine cooperation create detectable harmonics across quantum space," Harmony explained. "What you have built here, a civilization based on voluntary association rather than forced compliance, generates a signature unlike anything we encountered in our own galaxy." "And you believe this signature might be relevant to combating the Devourers?" "We believe it might be essential. The Devourers appear to be attracted to concentrated power sources, the kind generated by traditional conquest civilizations. But cooperative civilizations generate different patterns, more complex and harder to track." Admiral Chan's eyes lit up with understanding. "You're saying that the very thing that made us stronger against the Karlax might also make us harder for these entities to locate and target?" "More than that," Harmony replied. "Cooperative civilizations can disperse and adapt more effectively than hierarchical ones. When the Devourers destroyed our central worlds, our entire civilization collapsed because everything depended on centralized control. Your model suggests the possibility of a civilization resilient enough to survive even total defeat of its primary systems." The implications were staggering. What had begun as a transformation born of military necessity might represent the evolution of galactic civilization itself, not just better ways to fight wars, but better ways to survive existential threats. Queen Vixara was quiet for several moments before speaking. "Harmony of distant stars, integration into our confederation requires acceptance of our fundamental principles: voluntary association, mutual benefit, respect for diversity. Are you prepared to embrace these concepts?" "We are prepared to learn them," Harmony replied. "Our own civilization was based on harmonic resonance, different consciousness streams working in parallel toward common goals. Your model appears to be a more complex evolution of similar principles." "Then, we welcome you to the Confederation," the Queen said formally. "But understand that membership here isn't a gift, it's a responsibility. You'll be expected to contribute to the common defense, to share your knowledge freely, and to help us prepare for the challenges that may be coming." "We understand and accept." As the formal ceremonies concluded and the integration process began, Queen Vixara found herself back in her private study with Princess Kalra and Admiral Chen. The view from her window now showed not just the capital of a Zephyrian empire, but the heart of a galactic civilization that spanned multiple species, multiple worlds, and now multiple galaxies. "Mother," Kalra said quietly, "when you gestured toward Admiral Chen in that arena months ago and called her your warrior, did you have any idea it would lead to this?" Queen Vixara's mandibles clicked in what was definitely amusement this time. "I knew that humans represented something different, something that might change us. But this?"
She gestured toward the displays showing integration protocols for extragalactic refugees. This exceeds even my capacity for long-term planning. Admiral Chen smiled.
Your Majesty, speaking as someone who started this whole process as a prisoner facing execution, I can say that transformation has a way of exceeding everyone's expectations.
Indeed.
But now comes the truly difficult part, proving that what we've built can survive not just success, but the kind of ultimate challenges that destroyed entire galactic civilizations. The Queen moved to her desk and activated the communication systems that linked her to every world in the Confederation. All member species, all integrated governments, all allied civilizations, we stand at the threshold of something unprecedented. We have become not just an empire or an alliance, but a new form of galactic civilization built on principles of cooperation, diversity, and mutual respect. Her image appeared on screens across hundreds of worlds, addressing billions of beings who had once been enemies and were now partners in the greatest experiment in cooperative civilization that the galaxy had ever seen.
The challenges ahead may test us beyond anything we have faced before.
But we face them not as subjects serving the will of distant rulers, but as citizens building something greater than any single species could achieve alone. We face them not with fear of differences, but with appreciation for the strength that diversity provides. She paused, allowing the translation systems to process her words across dozens of languages and communication methods. In the arena where this transformation began, a human prisoner taught us that true strength comes not from the ability to dominate others, but from the wisdom to inspire them.
That lesson has made us stronger than any empire built on conquest could ever be.
That lesson will guide us as we face whatever challenges the future may hold. As her address concluded and responses began flowing in from across the Confederation, messages of support, offers of assistance, pledges of cooperation from species who had once been mortal enemies, Queen Vixara reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. When she had first called Colonel Chen my warrior, she had been speaking metaphorically about the human's potential value as a military asset. Now, as she watched the real-time display showing cooperation and coordination across multiple galaxies, she understood that the title had been prophetic in ways she could never have imagined. The warrior she had identified was not just an individual soldier, but the spirit of cooperation. That individual represented a force that could transform enemies into allies, subjects into citizens, and an empire into something that might endure even the end of galaxies. Standing beside her daughter and the human admiral who had helped make it all possible, Queen Vixara of the Zephyrian Empire, now first speaker of the Galactic Confederation, looked out at the stars and smiled. The galaxy was vast and full of challenges, but for the first time in her long life, she faced the future not with the determination to conquer it, but with the wisdom to build something worthy of preserving. And, in the quantum harmonics of space itself, the resonance patterns of genuine cooperation spread outward like ripples in an infinite pond, carrying word to distant corners of the universe that something new had emerged, something that proved that different was not inferior, that diversity was strength, and that the greatest victories were won not by defeating one's enemies, but by helping them become something better than they had ever imagined possible.